The third title, does it matter that your personal circumstances influence how seriously your knowledge is taken? Well, if we start defining our terms, the first one I've gone to here is the notion of knowledge being taken seriously. It could be looked at inside the knowledge framework in terms of methodology or in terms of historical development, I would suggest. If it's looked at in terms of methodology, then you could be looking in terms of the credibility of the knowledge, what makes knowledge credible, the reliability of the knowledge. So if you're dealing with the human sciences, then or history, you could be thinking about an OPVL, which is part of the method of those subject areas. If you're looking in the natural sciences, then you're looking at using the rigor of the scientific analysis process, which we'll get to in a bit. Historical development of knowledge being taken seriously, you can really sort of think about, well, which knowledge was taken seriously and what were the implications and the consequences of that knowledge being taken seriously. Then the counter of that also, you could be looking at what knowledge wasn't taken seriously. Why wasn't it taken seriously? Were there good reasons for that knowledge to not be taken seriously? And then another direction is, was there knowledge that was taken seriously that shouldn't have been? Later on it was debunked, or later on it was found to be false, or etc. And isn't that also part of the methodology of a subject as well, to be constantly looking at the knowledge that has been taken with great credibility and to be always subjecting it to review? Okay, so is there, who takes knowledge seriously? Someone has to take it seriously. Who is that? Is it unknowledgeable people, kids and laypersons, ordinary people? Are there times when such persons should be taken seriously? And they're not, due to the perception that they're not worthy of serious consideration as a group. And normally we would take knowledge seriously if it's coming from a group of scientists or people who are experts in that field. Those people have got the credentials for us to be taking their knowledge seriously, or for other experts to be taking their knowledge seriously. It's kind of interesting looking at all of that, because we now have an interesting time in history where anti-intellectualism is quite widespread, and scientists and experts who we should be taking seriously are not being taken seriously due to this wave of anti-intellectualism that we seem to be experiencing around the world in the context of such examples as climate change and other issues like that. How should personal knowledge be evaluated against shared knowledge? That might be an interesting overarching KQ. You would also need to define your personal circumstances. How are these circumstances to be defined? What connections can be drawn between personal circumstances and personal knowledge? Personal circumstances, when do personal circumstances influence how seriously our personal knowledge is being taken by others? Right? So personal circumstances might be getting defined in terms of gender differences, wealth differences, education differences. And I just mentioned that before about the anti-intellectualism movement. Whether you're a student or a teacher, who gets taken more seriously? How old you are, whether you're a young person, very young, a kid, or whether you are in your 50s or 60s and you've been inside an area for a long time, studying it and working in that area. So age might play a role as well. Review of people whose work is taken seriously versus those whose work was not taken seriously in a particular field might be interesting. And then also, these all become interesting because they're all related. They can be all related to stereotyping, where people are not being taken seriously, or particular groups are not being taken seriously, and they should be. But it's because of bias, negative bias factors that could be involved, such as women and also millennials. There's something about millennials as well. Can we really take millennials seriously? And yet they should be. Why? You would need to support that. Are there any circumstances when personal circumstances should influence how seriously personal knowledge is taken? Interesting line. In the arts, particularly in literature, there is a component of literary analysis where we can look at authors' biography and see how those personal circumstances have played an important role in their work and in their view and perspectives, which are being exhibited through their work. So you could look at some examples there. Why shouldn't personal circumstances be a factor of influence on our regard for knowledge? When shouldn't it be? When should personal circumstances not factor in at all? And I just mentioned about prejudices. Are there any other times that it shouldn't play a factor? And we'll get back to this in a second. There are some implications. If personal circumstances shouldn't be a factor of influence, then, well, what factors should influence our regard for knowledge? When should knowledge be taken seriously? And that's when we can get into the knowledge framework again, and we can look at methodology. Particularly in the sciences, we want to be as objective as we possibly can, and that involves also removing any personal or historical influences from the subject that we are trying to understand. Is that always a good thing to do? Are there times when it doesn't work as clearly as that? Are there, for example, even in quantum sciences? Now, one of the arguments or conclusions is that the world cannot be understood without taking the personal viewpoint seriously and including it within the experimental design. What are the consequences when differences in personal circumstances limit researchers' inclusion in the development of knowledge? Right. So what happens when we do take personal circumstances into account in the production of knowledge, and we ignore that contribution to knowledge or that understanding due to the personal circumstances of the person or persons involved? That could be an interesting sideline. What happens when knowledge is taken very seriously? That's an implication of the title as well. Okay, so there's about a page there of notes and ideas for you.